the Information Commissioner's Office. If you want to use the Welsh language service, please press 9. If not, please hold. We do not audio record calls to this helpline. For information about what we do with personal data, please visit our website at www.ico.org.uk/privacy-notice. Our helpline is for members of the public themselves. Select carefully from the following 4 options. Know the extension number of the person you want to speak to, please press 1. If you are a member of the public, please press 2. Please select carefully from the following 3 options. To discuss a complaint or inquiry you have already sent to us, please press 1. If you are a whistleblower, that is, you have a complaint about your employer or your ex-employer and want to report it to us, please press 2. For general advice about the information rights legislation we deal with, please press 3. To return...
Information Commissioner's Office, Richard speaking.
Yes, good morning. Did you say your name was Trishan? Richard, sorry, I didn't hear you correctly. My name is Mr. Hussain. I'm ringing you up today just to make some general inquiries regarding the use of CCTV recordings.
Okay.
Would you be able to assist us? Yes?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, well, it's all to do with, as I explained, I'm a private citizen, all right? I'm not working in any other capacity other than just being just a resident and living my normal life. I have CCTV cameras in my home. I record people coming in and out, like the postman comes into my house. I record that. There's no issue with that, is there?
So there should be. Do the images capture just your property or?
Yeah, just my property.
Just my. No, that's absolutely fine then.
Okay, and then what happens is that the recordings get uploaded to a cloud server.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, so if you're just doing this as an individual, you're not doing that as a business or like an organisation.
Okay, all right. Now, when I go out into the community, when I leave my house, I get into my vehicle's got a dash camera, it records everything where I've gone. All right,
okay.
Picks up people on the streets, all right, records that, come back home, it uploads it to the cloud. Is that okay?
Yeah, again, as you're doing that as an individual capacity, then that's fine.
Okay. I leave my house, get in my car, all recorded. I get out of the car, I slap on a webcam, a camera, and go about my daily business, shopping around, going into various public and private places, recording things, just people generally, or just my own activities, doing some shopping, going to the chemist, going to the doctor, going to the hospital, and recording them. And through that recording process, I'm capturing other faces, people walking around, doing the normal everyday activity. I come home, upload that to this cloud server. Is that okay?
Okay, I've not heard that one before, to be honest with you. But what we say about the data protection of GDPR only applies to organisations and not someone acting as an individual like yourself.
Okay.
With CCTV, we generally say if you're capturing any images which are outside your property, then you should have a sign up to make people aware that they may be recorded.
Okay, but that's just out of courtesy, isn't it?
Well, if they would, if you are capturing images off your property, then people do have the right under GDPR to ask for a copy of that recording. So that's why you need to make them aware that.
Okay, but how? I mean, the example I gave you is that if it's my own property, all right, and this is where I take contention with this. I'm pointing it in my garden. That's my property. That's under my jurisdiction. So there's no question about me recording. Okay, but when I get into my vehicle, I'm within my vehicle, and the vehicle is not recording the content of inside my jurisdiction, i.e. the cockpit or the driver's inside. It's actually pointing outwards, all right, and it's pointing out to everybody else's garden and everybody else is walking along the street in the public highway.
Right. Okay.
So how does me being at home and recording for my domestic purposes not make me a data controller? But when I get into my vehicle and go outside and use a dash cam, I'm sure you have a dash cam, or you know other people have a dash cam. Does the use of a dash camera make you a data controller?
Just bear with me. I'm just going to have to just look into that, because I've not had anybody ask about that kind of situation, to be honest.
Oh yeah, sure. Take your time.
Right, the guidance isn't actually it doesn't go as specific to say about being out about in a car or on your person. It just mentions as in CCTV at your home. So the only thing it says, like I say, if you are capturing images which are not your property, then it just says that technically you should be making people aware that you are recording them.
Okay, all right, but you can understand, like I'm sure, like yourself, you use the taxi service. When you get into a taxi, or if you get into a bus these days, they have cameras inside and outside, and they make you aware that they're recording you.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can understand the reason that they do that is because they're carrying out a business activity, aren't they? Right. A taxi driver, irrespective of whether he's employed, self-employed, or a bus, when you get into a bus when there's cameras there, they're carrying out a business activity.
Yeah.
All right. But when somebody gets into their own vehicle and has a dash camera there, all right, pointing out to the bum, they're not carrying out a business activity, are they?
No, you doing. I appreciate you doing it as an individual, but.
Yes, and so where would the obligation? I can understand if I was doing something as a business activity that would make me a data controller. So, for example, the taxi driver whose taxi I get into, who has a CCTV camera, as soon as I get into that camera, he needs to make me aware because he's carrying out a business activity where I'm paying for that service. And he needs me to make me aware that obviously as part of the service that he's providing me, the use of carriage in his vehicle, that he's going to be recording me. He needs me first of all make me aware, and second of all give me the right to get a copy of that. Yes.
Yeah.
But if I'm in my own vehicle, all right, I'm not carrying out a business activity. It's for my insurance is not covered for like a business activity. It's for social and domestic purposes. So I'm in my own vehicle. I've got a dash camera. It's pointing outwards. I don't think I need to make the public aware that I'm recording them.
No, I've not heard of that having to be the case.
Okay, that's right. Because you can understand that it makes logical sense in it, because I don't have insurance. I'm not carrying out a business activity. So anybody who gets into my vehicle, that's upon myself to make them aware or not make them aware. There's no. I don't think I become a data controller simply because I have a camera.
No. As far as I'm aware, then like for it in the car, like you say. I don't
Okay.
The display sign.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So now one step further, I'll get out of my vehicle, all right, and I'm in my own person, in my own clothes, all right, and I go out into the public domain, go into the park, or let's say I go into the chemist or go into just carrying out my business, daily activities, which are for social and domestic purposes. I'm sure I don't need to make people aware that I'm recording them.
No, I can't see anything that says if it's outside the property. Then.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to clarify is that when the law legislation is quite clear. It says what's not covered is for what is it, domestic purposes or domestic purposes. I think the legislation mentions domestic purposes.
Yeah.
But the domestic purposes does not necessarily mean in the domestic environment. All right, I could carry out domestic purposes by going to the shopping centre. Yeah, so it's not. I mean, what I'm trying to clarify is that it's not limited to my home environment. So coming back to the question of when you said the CCTV has to only cover my garden, why? Why can't it cover anybody that's walking past my garden?
To be honest, I can't give you a straight answer on that.
Okay, it's all right. If you can't give me an answer, that's fair enough. I appreciate your honesty. So let's just move forward from this. The reason for my call today is that I went to my local hospital. Now, I contacted the chief executive of the information governance team at the local hospital last year, and I told them, and I put them on notice. I said, I'm going to come to the hospital. I'm going to take around my camera. All right, I'm going to record everything, and I'm going to upload it onto YouTube. Do you have an issue with this? And they came back to me regarding patient confidentiality, so on and so forth. I said, well, no, the hospital is a public place. All right, it's run by the NHS as a public place. I'm a public, I'm a urban explorer. I go around exploring wherever I want. I like take my recordings and stuff. Eventually, they said to me, as long as it's not like causing other people alarm and distress, then we can't see any issue with that. So you can understand if you're in a hospital and somebody's going around putting a camera up your face, that's not very. That's not very good, is it? I mean, it just causes a lot of people, startles a lot of people. They don't probably want to be recorded. But I told the hospital that I'll be doing my recordings covertly. All right, and the reason I did that was I asked them, I said I'm going to come to the trust property. I'm going to start recording them covertly, just walking around, going to the cafeteria, just walking around wherever the public's allowed to go to. Do you have an issue with this? And that was last year, and I was basically looking for them to consult their legal team or contact yourself and provide me with direct legislation that prevents me from doing so. And so I'm now asking you, there's no issue with that, is there?
No, because like you said, there's nothing specific to say. If you stare at me, I'm just getting because it sounds. I'm just checking a similar thing, like if you like filming the kids' school.
Yeah. I mean, I can. Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I don't have any children myself, but if I said, look, I want to go to the school. I mean, the thing is, with regards to that, I think that's a different situation because there are extra laws protecting children. So you can't go into the schools and start recording children. I'm sure there are extra provisions in law that minors cannot be recorded.
So here we go. Yeah, if the images were taken for personal use, then it's not covered by the GDPR, the Data Protection Act. So if you're just doing this for yourself. So.
Yeah. But that just raises a good point. I'm sure there was some law because when I load things up to YouTube, all right, it does tell me that there's laws, but you have to take into consideration that that's a different jurisdiction. That's America, and they have different states and different laws there. But just to say, I was under the impression that I couldn't not take recordings of children, simply because of there's lots of people that are nonces and stuff, yeah. But as it stands today, can I ask you, can I go, if my child is at school, can I go and start recording other children?
So if it's for personal use, then that's absolutely fine.
Well, that's surprising. I'm quite surprised at that. Because I thought there was some extra protection for children.
Well, if you like, you can. I'm just getting this off the ICO website myself, actually.
Okay, all right.
It's ico.org.uk.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the ICO. The reason for my call today is just simply to get some general information, and the reality is I have not really looked into children or into that. It's not something that I have a personal interest in or anything. I don't have any children, so I'm not going to go to school and stuff. But it's an interesting point, and maybe I'll look to challenge that. But as it stands today, the purpose of my call today was to just gain clarity regarding CCTV recordings or camera recordings. We mentioned, domestic purposes inside my house, outside my house, getting in the vehicle, walking around with a camera. Then I moved on to going on to trust property. And I quite clearly told the trust I was going to covertly record them. I then told them that, they advised me not to do it. They gave me all sorts of threats saying it's privacy, confidentiality. You may get sued by the people. All right. I just really couldn't find any law that prevents me. I then told them, look, I'm going to go around. I'm going to take my drone camera. All right, I've got a drone. I'm going to fly it around. It's going to be quite overt. Please, can you not try to get your security guards onto me? All right. I said all these things last year and nothing really happened. And so the reality is I didn't really proceed with doing any of that stuff. I just wanted to basically find out where that fine line is of what I can and cannot do. However, circumstances changed this year where I found myself in a circumstance where I went into a care home or where elderly people are and made a covert recording. Now, can you please clarify to me what my rights are of going into a care home and covertly recording people?
Just the same as before, as you're doing that as an individual, just for your personal use, then it's not covered. There's nothing stopping you under the Data Protection Act or GDPR.
Okay, all right. I just want to clarify this point. If I go into a care home, because you can understand, going into a hospital, it's a public environment as far as I'm concerned, all right, because it's paid by the NHS, the wards are open wards, and that's the distinction between a private hospital and a public hospital. Private hospitals, maybe you have your private room there where nobody can walk around, but the whole point of a public hospital is that, it's open to the public, and there's a certain expectation that when you go into hospital, you're going to be viewed or in the presence of other members of the public. But when it comes to a care home, see, we're now going into a different area here, because that may be a private care home, and also what rights do the individual have, because that's their home.
Well, I get what you're saying, but you're still just doing that as an individual. You're not processing that as an organisation.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that is that was my personal understanding of the situation, because as long as I'm not doing it for business purposes, and it's only for my domestic purposes, and it's for my own research, for my own freedom as a citizen, I'm within my rights to do that. I think that's what you're telling me, yes?
Yeah, quite right, yeah.
Yeah, but the hospital have turned around and said to me that, they're going to take, basically told me that I'm harassing them. All right?
They might not be happy about it, but there's nothing under that data protection law.
Yeah. That was my understanding of it as well. Because so what happened was that I told them I was going to do this all last year. They didn't do nothing about it. This year, I proceeded to actually go to my local hospital, record everything. And I didn't tell them that, look, I've done it, there you go, ha, ha, ha. I told them, look, I've recorded this, and the purpose of my recording was that I wanted to find out where the CCTV cameras were at the hospital. Because though I am a domestic private citizen, the hospital is a public trust. And therefore, if they're making any kind of CCTV recordings of members of the public, first, number one, they have to register with the ICO. And number two, they have to comply with the data protection legislation. So I explained that to them. I said to them, look, I'm going to be open and honest with you. I didn't come last year. I've come this year. I've walked around. I've made my own little video recording. It's covert recording. Nobody knows that I'm recording those things. I'm going to give you the date and time that I came on. I'm going to even give you the recording, my covert recording of all of that trip at hospital, so you can clearly identify me on your CCTV recordings. What I want you to do now is accept this as a subject access request and give me a copy of me walking around covertly recording on your trust property.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm within my rights to do that, aren't I?
Yes. So you're basically asking, like say, a subject access request because it's your personal data, because it's images of yourself walking around.
Yes. recording everybody else, yes. And so therefore they, although they may not like it and although they may have technical difficulties, they are then obligated to provide me with that recording, are they not?
So if they, I mean, it's likely there's other people captured on those images, obviously what we call third parties. So if they're unhappy to, if they're unwilling to give you a copy, we'd expect them to be able to say to you, do you want to come, do you want to visit the hospital and view the images on site? If they don't want to give you an actual copy to take away, they should offer you the chance to come in and look at those images at the hospital.
I see. But, obviously, let's just talk about legislation, because I'm obviously very apprehensive of going out, especially into the hospital, considering this coronavirus thing. But let's just move away from this. Under legislation, they are within their rights to redact information. That's the third party. So they're within their rights to redact any third party image.
Yeah. So you have to appreciate not all organisations have the IT to be able to redact those images. So that's when we would expect them to.
Okay, I understand this. Sorry, what did you say your name was again? Richard?
Yes.
Yeah, hi Richard. I mean, the reason I make these is that I personally take great deal of issue living under a surveillance state. All right, I take it, and I'm sure yourself, though that you work for the ICO, that by the time you've left your home and you've come into work, you've probably been captured on loads of CCTV cameras without your permission.
Yeah.
Yep. And the reason, that justification that's been given by other organizations is for security, for crime prevention. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And those are on the surface of it quite legitimate, because nobody asked me. The hospital didn't ask me if they could record me when I came into their trust property. It's just for simple security purposes. Now, putting up a camera is an easy thing. And then giving the justification that it's for security or crime prevention, that's fair enough. But by doing that, you're in effect eroding civil liberties. I.e., you've not asked me, you've not gained my consent. But all right, that's justified, and that's the reality that you and I both live in, and I accept that. I'm quite happy for you to do that. If your reasoning is that you're doing it for crime prevention, but then you're not investing the appropriate resources into ensuring that it's legislation compliant, that's where I do take an issue. So if I go to the hospital, and I'm going to the hospital because out of necessity, all right, either I've sustained an injury or I have got a relative who sustained an injury, I don't want to go to the hospital, but I'm going there. And because I'm going there, I'm now, in effect, becoming a data subject because I'm being recorded. Yeah. Right? Nobody's asked me for my permission. And if they asked me for my permission, I probably would have said no. But no, they've said it's quite easy to just put a camera on and record everybody and saying we're doing it for security reasons. That's fair enough. But now that comes with that right, or that facility, or that service that they require for their benefit, all right, comes with a legal obligation. And that legal obligation is that as soon as you put a CCTV camera up and you start recording people, that then becomes under data protection legislation. You therefore become a data controller. You therefore then must look to comply with the legislation. And if you then fail to comply with the legislation because you don't have the technical know-how, or you lack the resources to do so, then you shouldn't even have the camera up. I noticed, Mr. Richard, that when I ring the ICO, one of the first things that they say to us is that this call is not being recorded. All right?
Yes. Yeah.
And probably that's a decision made, because if this call was being recorded, or I would then be in a position to say to you, okay, well, fair enough. I don't really feel comfortable for me being recorded like this, because I'm ringing you up, wasting my money and time and resources to ring you up only to find myself being recorded. I probably won't give you consent to do that. But because I need this information, I'm then once again being obligated, just like being obligated to go to the hospital. But the ICO is clever enough to say that, you know what, let's not bother recording these calls, because what's going to happen subsequently is that people like me or some other people can say, well, all right, I rang you from this day, you recorded that conversation. For what purpose? Training and quality purposes. I want a copy of that. The ICO then has to spend time and resources collating and packaging my call recordings and sending them back to me. So rather than doing that, the ICO is quite forthright, like intuitively said, like, you know what, we're just going to have a policy, don't record the calls. Therefore, we're not obligated to come under the subject access request. Yes?
Yeah, yeah.
So similarly, the hospital quite easily can put a camera up on people and start recording them, all right? But that comes with the, they've chosen to do that. So they therefore must be lawful to do that. And in order for them to say it's lawful for us to do that is because we have implied consent, i.e., it's for security purposes. And that's fair enough. You're using the implied consent to record us, but then you're becoming a data controller and you're refusing to give me my data back, i.e., my recording on your systems, because you lack what technical abilities? Do you think that's justified?
Well, it's possible. But we'd expect them to be able to work with you to some compromise, such as viewing going on site to view the images, or if possible, if they could get a third-party company to redact the images if they can't do it themselves.
Okay, all right, okay.
See that they've looked into that.
Okay, Richard, you've been very, very helpful, and I think my understanding is very similar to what your understanding is. It's just that unfortunately the hospital have wrote back to me on the day I basically made a subject access request. They were meant to make disclosure on the 11th of March. I sent them an email on the 9th of March, just politely reminding them that they have a legal obligation to comply within the time period of 1 month. On the 11th of March, when they were supposed to comply, they wrote back to me saying we need further evidence to identify who you are, because we can't do it from the recordings, because we don't have access to the internet or YouTube or something. I said, okay. But you have had a month and you've accepted the subject access request, you've acknowledged it. It was incumbent upon you, the trust, to identify who are, myself. You didn't do that. You waited until the last hour. All right, the last day after I sent you a reminder, only to ask me to disclose to you my photographic evidence of identifying me. I said that's not acceptable. You've had 1 month. That's all you're permitted to do. If you wanted to, and if the situation was complex, you could have asked for an extra 2 months extension. They've not done that. What they've chosen to do, and I said to them, and I asked them a series of questions, do you even still retain that recordings? Because often what happens is that most companies, they do a CCTV recordings and they say that we'll keep it for not longer than necessary, and they usually keep those recordings for a month. Okay? And so that's the way they get around the legislation. They say, look, it's only for the purposes of what we're using it for, security purposes. We're not going to keep them indefinitely. We only keep it for a month. I wrote back to them and said, okay, well, fair enough. I want a copy of that. And on the day in question, on the 11th of March, they've turned around and said to me that you give us further information. I said, I'm not willing to do that because you've had a month. You can identify who I am. You're basically asking me to provide you with photographic evidence of myself, which is further data you want to identify me. You've clearly had an opportunity to identify me for a period of a month. And then subsequently, I've received an email telling me the fact that, they constitute my behavior as intimidating, harassment. They're gonna, obviously report me to the ICO, and basically start to legally threaten me.
Right. No, sounds like they've got the slightly wrong end of the stick there. Because even if they do delete the footage after a month, for example, the fact that you've already made the request within that month period, they can't use the excuse that they deleted it because your request came in well within time.
Yes.
So if you did have to bring the complaint to us, we'd look at that, and it would suggest that they use that as a tactic to not provide it you.
Yes, right. Yes. I mean, the reason I'm ringing yourself up, I've already escalated that through the complaints process. Lodged that with yourselves. But you work for the ICO. You know that if I lodge a complaint, there has a 3-month turnaround time before it's allocated to a caseworker.
Yes, just exceptionally busy at the moment.
I know, I appreciate that, and I can understand because obviously this legislation is quite a social change. That's the reason why I'm just preemptively having a general question and answer session with yourself rather than speaking within details. You've been very helpful, Richard. Just one last point, if you could please assist me with.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, it's around the same kind of theme, but now we're moving away from the trust onto the police. The police service have something called automatic number plate recognition systems.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like when when you've driven from your home today, you've been caught up on several CCTV cameras. Some of those cameras are going to be on the motorway. Some of those are going to be owned by the police. Some of them are going to be owned and operated by the local authority. So as you've travelled from work today, your vehicle registration number has been automatically registered collected by either the local authority. So should you have gone into a bus lane when you shouldn't have done so, you'll be getting a summon, or a road traffic offence being committed by you and being asked to pay £60. Similarly, if you were being caught on the police, the same thing would happen. So that therefore makes them data controllers, both the local authority and the police. And they're looking to obviously financially profiteer from CCTV recordings. And that's fair enough, because they can justify that, saying implied consent once again, and also for road traffic safety. Once again, if I make a subject access request to both the police and the local authority, I'm saying, look, I'm going to declare, and this is, I've sent the police and the local authority a public notice. So I've put them on notice. I've said to them, I'm placing you on notice that this is who I am, all right, as a natural person, and this is my vehicle registration number. So what I want from yourselves is that I'm quite happy for you to record me while I'm driving around in the local district, and if I'm caught speeding, you're quite within your rights to use those recordings as evidence against me. But what I will say is that whilst I'm out and about in the community driving around and I'm being caught on your captured on your CCTV systems and my vehicle is being recognized, what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to delete my data in line with your normal data retention policies of 1 month. You should only delete my data once a copy has been provided to me. I'm within my rights to ask for that, aren't I?
So, what do you mean? You're asking them to keep it indefinitely until you...
No, I'm asking them that, they have a normal data retention policy of 1 month. Yeah. Yes. After that, it gets automatically destroyed.
Yeah.
What I'm asking them is that before destroying my data, you need to give me a copy of it.
Okay, so so in theory you've made a SAR to them.
I'm making a perpetual SAR to them because they're making perpetual recordings of me. All right. So as soon as I leave my house, I'm not gonna. Obviously, there's something in the data protection legislation that says that you can't be a vexatious SAR requester. All right. Yeah. So I can't be making SARs every time. All I'm saying is that, look, you're recording me while I'm driving around. You can identify me indirectly through my number plate. I'm quite happy for you to do that. I'm quite happy for you to gather evidence about me and use that evidence against me should I be speeding or committing any criminal activity. I'm quite happy for you to do that. But that comes with the obligation that should I be recorded on your systems, that you just can't destroy my data at the end of the month because of your data retention policy. So every time you record me, you need to send me that on a monthly basis.
It's for each organisation to set their own retention period and justify that. So you wouldn't. They'd only have to keep that information if you make a request for specific information. But it's.
But they're making recordings of me, on a daily basis.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate what you're saying, but it's not for yourself or the ICO to determine how long they keep that information.
No. It's not about how long they keep them. I'm quite happy for them to have a week retention policy, a month retention policy. I'm even quite happy for them to keep my data indefinitely. All right. I don't have an issue with their retention policy. What issue I have is that the deleting of my data without providing me with a copy of it first.
Well, in that case, you'd have to be constantly asking for subject access requests.
But then if I constantly ask them for subject access requests on a monthly basis, I can set up an automated system. That would then make me violate the vexatious, they can use that whole you're doing this for vexatious purposes.
They'd be within the rights to say that then, in that case, yeah.
Yeah, but that I'm not doing it for vexatious purposes. I take my data very seriously, all right? I've just explained to yourself, I've gone into the trust property, recorded them. I then made a subject access request of their recording of me. all I'm trying to say is that if somebody wants to record me, that's fine, all right. But I then need to be able to retain a copy of that recording, because in essence, you're making copies of me, all right, without my permission. You're saying it's implied consent, and you're justifying it for security purposes, all right, and crime prevention. And you're also then saying the fact that we're going to use it for our purposes, for whatever our retention period is, and then we're going to delete it. So basically, that's my data that you're basically handling, controlling for your purposes. And then all I'm asking is that, all right, you want to use my data, okay, fair enough, but I want a copy of it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but like I say, as far as we're concerned, that would be fine for them to do. The only way you could potentially, we can't change the data protection laws, so I know it's probably not be much help to say this to you, but if anybody has any, if anybody's unhappy with the way the laws are, and that, we say in the first instance, speak to your MP about it, because it's not something that's going to we can change. And
I understand. Like I said, look, all I asked for is just general queries. Just like you agreed with me up to the point of where I've mentioned perpetual SAR requests, because I'm being perpetually recorded.
Yeah, I mean, the Act does give you the right to ask for your data, but at the same time, if you seem to be constantly asking for it, it's possible that they may say it's a vexatious request. So I see what you're saying. There's a bit of it's like agreeing with you to a point, and then it's turning around, and the Act siding with the controller saying, actually, this is we can't just keep supplying this.
Yeah, because of technical problems, innit? Like, for example, sorry to interrupt. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just agreeing with you. It's GDPR gives you these rights, but then in certain instances like this, it's possible that the controller can state various exemptions, such as repeat requests, vexatious requests.
But
it's just the way that it is quite vague in parts, the wording in the law. So all we could do at the ICO is give our opinion on how they handled your request. Enforce that you get copies of that. So
I mean, the reason I mentioned that is like, do you remember in our conversation we said that you're not recording this conversation? Yes, right. So you've made that decision as the ICO because of the overhead, because there's an overhead associated with recording the calls. Yes, you can also the ICO can justify recording this conversation for training and quality purposes. All right. Clearly, you need to be trained on quality purposes, can be recorded, so you can justify recording. But then the ICO recognizes that, wait on a minute, that comes with the overhead. Similarly, other organizations that processing data quite simply put a camera because that's all to their benefit, but they're not willing to take on the responsibility of the overheads. Now, with regards to me going on to hospital or me going into, for example, the bus station or anywhere else, that is not perpetual recording. I would then, if I went on one day, for example, if I went on a Monday, I can say to them, look, I came down to the chemist or the hospital on a Monday. You recorded me. Please can I have a copy of that? All right. I can go down on a Tuesday. All right, and I can ask for that because obviously, like you said, you've agreed with me on all these points. But when it comes to me driving, doing my normal activity, it can be classed surveillance. All right, where my vehicle is being registered all the time.
Yeah.
All right, and therefore, then this is in essence a backhanded loophole where surveillance can take place without any overhead. So it's quite easily for them to put, for us to be, you and I, to be put upon the vehicle registration database systems, and they can retain that information. But it doesn't come with any overhead to them.
I mean, in the Data Protection Act, there are things like regarding security and those kind of things where they are exempt from, they can do these things. That's why I said that that is in the law.
Yeah, I understand, and you're perfectly right that there has to be fine line between private liberty and national security. So if it's for national security purposes, I'm all for that, because obviously national security is my security and your security. But when the examples I gave you are where the local authority are putting me under surveillance when I'm going around in the city centre, I might go into the wrong bus lane, and they're then fining me money for my mistakes. And that's fine as well. I shouldn't be making those mistakes. For example, the police are capturing me doing speeding, and they've got evidence, and they're using that to capture me speeding, and that's fine as well. I shouldn't be speeding. But ultimately, if they're capturing my data, that comes with a responsibility that if I'm going to be recorded, I should have a copy of that recording.
Yeah, it's the thing with saying it's a balance of both sides' rights. So we've just got to weigh up. If you're quite right, you were within your rights to ask for a copy of your data, but if it's seen that you were to be like a nuisance requester, for want of a better word, and
No, yeah, I understand, but that terminology of a nuisance requester, it's their activity that's making me a nuisance requester.
Okay, but we'd have to look. Have you got a genuine reason for wanting that data constantly? What's the reason you want that?
Okay. I mean, now we're on the subject. Are my requests genuine, or are they maliciously motivated? If they're maliciously motivated, they're within their rights to refuse. I accept that, but I've just clearly explained that. I consider that my data, my intangible property. All right. And so therefore, you can understand that's tangible property, which is you can physically touch, that are intangible property. And so therefore, if that I consider that my intangible property, and I'm exerting my property rights on it.
Okay. Well, like I say, so just balancing acts of weighing up the rights of each side.
Richard, you've been most helpful, and you've been most patient with me, and you've been very open and transparent. When there were things that you could not understand, or you were not in a position to provide me with, you've been open and said, look, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. So I'm very grateful for your time. I'm very grateful for the information that you've provided me with. It's been most helpful.
All right, no problem. Well, thanks for your call today.
Thank you. Goodbye.